She thought she would marry a handicapped millionaire, but what happened at the wedding left her stunned. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The rain had been falling since late afternoon, turning the sidewalks into long silver ribbons and soaking through Mia Carter's worn canvas shoes as she hurried down the quiet street toward the only cafe still open after 10 p.m. The bell above the door chimed softly when she stepped inside. Warm yellow lights glowed over polished wood tables, the smell of roasted coffee beans hanging thick in the air, but even the cozy atmosphere couldn't chase away the tightness in her chest. She pushed damp hair away from her face, her fingers trembling slightly as she scanned the room. Only one man was there, seated near the back, posture straight, black suit sharp as a blade, a sleek wheelchair positioned perfectly beneath him. The glow from the overhead lamp framed his expressionless face, and for a moment Mia hesitated, her voice caught somewhere between fear and resignation. She had seen him once before from a distance, inside the hospital hallway where her mother lay fighting for another chance at life. A nurse had whispered his name like it carried weight, Ethan Ward. Young, brilliant, impossibly wealthy, and according to the tabloids scattered on waiting room tables, colder than the marble floors he wheeled across. Mia swallowed hard and took a step toward him, her heart thudding the way it always did when a bill collector called or a doctor sighed before giving estimates she could never afford. Her backpack strap dug into her shoulder. Inside were overdue notices, eviction warnings, and a note from the hospital stating they could not proceed with surgery without partial payment. She was out of time, out of options, and out of luck. Ethan looked up the moment she approached. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, steady, unreadable. "You came," he said, not like someone relieved, but like someone confirming. "A calculation." Mia tried to smile, but it wobbled. "Your assistant told me it was urgent." "It is." He gestured toward the empty chair across from him. She sat, smoothing her thrift store skirt, hoping he wouldn't notice her hands shaking. He slid a thin folder across the table. It stopped right in front of her, the edge slightly damp from a drop of water that had clung to her sleeve. "Read it," he said. Mia opened it, expecting medical forms or financial documents, something related to the charity event she thought she had been invited to volunteer at. Instead, her breath hitched. The words at the top were impossible. A marriage agreement. For a few seconds, nothing made sense. Not the soft jazz playing from the speakers, not the warm glow of the cafe, not the steady beat of rain on the window. She blinked, reread, blinked again. This is a joke, right? Ethan's voice didn't waver. "No. I need a wife before the board meeting in 30 days. In exchange, I'll cover your mother's surgery, the rehabilitation, and clear your outstanding debts. Everything." Mia felt heat crawl up her throat. Her mother's face flashed in her mind. The oxygen tube, the weak smile, the whispered apology for being a burden. Then she pictured the eviction notice taped to their apartment door, the landlord's impatient voice, the hospital's final warning. Ethan continued, calm as a surgeon. "I don't need affection. I don't need companionship. I simply need someone who can stand beside me when certain people attempt to strip what belongs to me." His eyes lowered for a moment to the wheels of his chair, then lifted again with a quiet defiance that startled her. "And you," he added, "need someone who can buy you time." The cafe felt suddenly smaller, like the walls had moved closer. Mia pressed her palm against her knee to stop it from shaking. "Why me?" Ethan didn't blink. "Because you're desperate enough to consider it, and honest enough not to exploit it." A single drop of rain slid down the window beside her. It was the only movement in the world as her pulse roared in her ears. She should have stood up and walked out. She should have said no. But desperation has a way of turning the unthinkable into the inevitable, and as she stared at the signature line on the last page, Mia realized this wasn't a proposal. It was a lifeline and a trap, and she was already tangled in both. And this was the moment everything began to unravel, long before the wedding day that would leave her, and everyone watching, in absolute shock. The rain had stopped by the time Mia stepped back out of the cafe, but the world still felt soaked and heavy, as if even the air understood the weight of what had just been placed in her hands. She clutched the folder against her chest as she walked down the dimly lit sidewalk, the cold wind pushing through her thin jacket and raising goosebumps along her arms. Every step felt uncertain, trembling, as if the ground beneath her was shifting with each breath she took. The headlights of passing cars streaked across puddles, and for a moment she caught her own reflection there, warped and unrecognizable. Was she really considering marrying a man she barely knew? A man whose gaze pierced through her like he could see every secret she had ever tried to hide? But more than that, a man who needed her for reasons he refused to fully explain. By the time she reached the hospital, her hands were stiff from gripping the folder for so long. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a pale glow. Nurses walked briskly past, their shoes squeaking softly on polished linoleum. Mia paused outside her mother's room, steadying her breath before she pushed the door open. Her mother looked so small in the hospital bed, swallowed by blankets and wires, skin pale under the warm lamplight. The heart monitor beeped steadily, but each beep felt like a countdown. A reminder. A warning. Mia slipped inside, pulling up a chair. Her mother stirred slightly, offering a tired but gentle smile. "You are back late," she whispered. Her voice was fragile, like a thread stretched too thin. Mia forced a smile. "I had to talk to someone about an option." Her mother's brow creased. Even in her weakness, she could still sense every shift in her daughter's voice. "What kind of option?" Mia hesitated, her eyes drifting down to the folder in her lap. The words on the cover seemed to shout now, louder than any hospital machine. She could not tell her mother the truth. Not yet. "Just something that could help with your surgery," she said softly. "Maybe even save the apartment." Her mother reached for her hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. "I do not want you to sacrifice your happiness for me, Mia." Mia nodded, even though she knew she was already considering it. That was the problem with desperation. It did not wait for permission. Outside the room, the hallway felt colder. She leaned her back against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor, the folder resting beside her. She opened it again, staring at the bold lettering, the typed clauses, the final page with that empty signature line. Ethan Ward. Why her? Why any of this? She closed her eyes and remembered the way he had looked at her. Calculated, yes. Controlled, absolutely. But beneath that, something else. A flicker of something wounded, something he refused to acknowledge. A man trapped in a chair, not because he lacked strength, but because life had stripped away far too much from him all at once. She pressed her palms against her face. "What am I doing?" she whispered. A doctor passed by, reminding her about the pending decision for her mother's surgery. They needed payment. Soon. Too soon. Mia finally stood, picking up the folder as if it weighed as much as the world. As she stepped out of the hospital into the cold night air, she knew the truth she did not want to admit. She was running out of time, and Ethan's offer was not a door she could simply close. It was the only door left standing. When she reached the small apartment she shared with her mother, the eviction notice was still hanging crookedly on the door. The sight made her stomach twist. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and sat at the small kitchen table. There, under the dim light, she opened the folder one more time. Her eyes lingered on the terms, the conditions, the coldness of the contract. Then she turned to the blank signature line. Her hand shook as she reached for a pen. She did not sign. Not yet. But she set the pen down beside the paper, and in that moment, she knew the decision had already begun forming inside her, slow and irreversible. She whispered into the empty room. "Is this what saving a life costs?" And somewhere far away, in a silent mansion with cold marble floors and dim corridors, Ethan Ward sat alone in his study, staring at the same contract, waiting. Not impatiently, not nervously, but with the quiet certainty of a man who believed she would return. And that certainty was the most unsettling part of all. Morning light seeped through the thin curtains of Mia's apartment, casting pale stripes across the kitchen table where the contract still lay untouched except for the pen resting beside it. She had barely slept, her mind replaying every word Ethan had said, every clause, every possible consequence. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second nudging her closer to an answer she had been trying to avoid. By 8 a.m., the hospital had already called once. Then again at 8:30. Her mother's doctor left a voicemail with a tone that was gentle but urgent, reminding her that surgery could not be postponed indefinitely. Mia stood at the sink, splashing cold water on her face, trying to steady her breathing. She stared at her reflection in the small cracked mirror above the faucet. The girl looking back at her was tired, scared, and running out of time. By noon, she grabbed her coat, tucked the contract into her bag, and stepped out into the crisp air. Her fingers trembled as she boarded the bus toward the Ward Corporation building, its mirrored glass towers visible from nearly every corner of the city. The closer the bus got, the more she felt her stomach twist with fear and something else, resolve. The lobby of the Ward building was a world she did not belong to. Marble floors so polished they reflected the ceiling lights like a mirror, security guards in tailored uniforms, and employees dressed in expensive suits moving with purpose. Mia felt the weight of her thrift store jacket instantly, but she kept walking toward the reception desk. "I am here to see Ethan Ward," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. The receptionist eyed her, assessing her clothes, her nervous posture, but after a quick phone call she nodded and directed Mia to a private elevator. The ride up was silent except for the hum of the cables and the pounding of Mia's heart. When the doors opened, she stepped into a quiet hallway lined with modern art and floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the skyline. Ethan was already waiting for her at the end of the hall, his wheelchair positioned beside a long conference table. His posture was rigid, his expression unreadable. "You came back," he said. It was not a question. Mia swallowed hard and took the seat across from him. She placed the folder on the table. "I read everything. Twice." His eyes flicked to the folder. And I need to understand every part of this before I agree to anything," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Ethan nodded once and opened a second folder in front of him, identical to hers. "Then we will go through it together." For the next hour, he outlined each clause. She was required to attend 5 public events as his wife. She would live in his home, but retain her independence. She could continue her job as long as security concerns were met. She would not be permitted to reveal personal details about him or the arrangement. And above all, the marriage would remain strictly without romantic expectation. Mia listened carefully, asking questions when she needed clarity. Ethan answered every one, factual and controlled, never once showing frustration or impatience. Finally, he reached the end of the contract and closed the folder. "There are no hidden traps," he said quietly. "Only obligations. And an exchange that benefits us both." Mia tapped her fingers lightly against the table. "You keep saying it will benefit you, but you never say why." Ethan's jaw tightened, a shadow passing across his eyes. "My family is attempting to remove me from control of the company," he said. "Certain board members believe my condition makes me unfit to lead. A stable marriage counters their narrative." His words were sharp, but beneath them she sensed the pain of a man who had been measured and dismissed by people who should have protected him. Mia let out a slow breath. "So this is not about companionship." "No," he said. "It is about survival." She looked down at the contract, then back at Ethan. His face was calm, but there was something else there, something she had missed before. Not coldness, not arrogance. Loneliness. The kind that sits deep in the chest and grows roots. He moved slightly, adjusting the wheels of his chair. "Mia, if you decide no, this conversation ends and I will not contact you again. But if you decide yes," he paused, holding her gaze, "I will honor every promise written here." Her mother's face flashed through her mind again, fragile and fading. The eviction notice. The medical debt. The ticking clock. Mia gathered the folder into her hands, her pulse hammering against her ribs. "I need one more night," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Then take it. But do not take too long. Time is the one thing neither of us has." Mia stood, her knees almost buckling as she turned toward the elevator. She could feel Ethan's eyes on her back, steady and silent, as the doors closed between them. And even as the elevator descended, she realized that everything she thought she knew about this arrangement was beginning to shift in ways she did not understand yet. The night Mia spent deciding felt longer than any night in her life. Every sound in the apartment, from the radiator clicking to the distant sirens outside the window, seemed louder because of how quiet her own thoughts were. She sat at the small kitchen table where the overhead bulb flickered occasionally, staring at the contract as if it were some living thing breathing in front of her. She thought about her mother sleeping only a room away, unaware of the storm unfolding around her. Mia touched the edge of the contract, running her finger along the sharp corner, feeling the weight of a decision that was no longer theoretical. By sunrise, she already knew the truth. She gathered the papers, placed them carefully back into the folder, and got dressed with hands that did not feel like her own. The city was waking up as she boarded the early morning bus, people clutching their coffees and phones, moving through their routines with the comfort of normal lives. Mia held the folder close as if it were a fragile secret. When she reached the Ward Corporation building again, she felt the same rush of nerves as before, but this time there was something steadier beneath it. She walked past the reception desk, her voice clear when she said she was expected. The private elevator rose silently, reflecting her anxious face in the metal panels. Ethan was already waiting when the doors opened, seated at the far end of the conference room with his hands folded neatly in his lap. The morning sun poured through the windows, outlining him in a pale glow that made him look both distant and strangely vulnerable. He studied her expression before speaking. "You have decided." Mia nodded slowly. "I have." She set the folder on the table and opened it. Her signature glistened in blue ink across the final page. She pushed it toward him. "I will do it." Ethan's eyes lowered to the signature for a long moment, and in that small pause, she felt something shift in the air, subtle but real. "Very well," he said gently, then called for his assistant. A woman in her 40s entered with a tablet in one hand and a calm, professional smile. "This is Rachel," Ethan introduced. "She will guide you through the necessary preparations." Mia stood up, unsure of what preparations meant, but Rachel immediately shifted into a steady, reassuring tone. "We will begin with wardrobe, posture training for public events, and reviewing your speaking roles. Nothing overwhelming, just what is needed to help you feel confident." Confident was the last thing Mia felt as she followed Rachel out of the conference room, but the woman's warm voice made it easier to breathe. They entered another floor entirely, where a team of stylists and assistants were already waiting. Racks of elegant dresses lined the walls, shelves held accessories polished to a shine. For a moment, Mia wanted to turn around and run, but Rachel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Do not worry. We are here to support you, not change you." The next several hours followed a whirlwind rhythm Mia had never experienced before. A stylist measured her carefully, murmuring numbers while pins glinted between her lips. Another person examined her shoes and shook her head before replacing them with a pair that actually fit. A makeup artist softened her features, not to hide her, but to draw attention to her eyes. The most surprising part came when Rachel guided her into a room with mirrors from floor to ceiling. She asked Mia to practice walking beside a wheelchair, keeping her steps measured and aligned with Ethan's natural pace. "You are not his caretaker," Rachel explained, "but you must know how to move with him, not around him. He is the center of the frame at public events. You must complement that, not overshadow it." Mia nodded, trying to absorb everything. It was harder than she expected. She felt awkward keeping pace with an invisible partner, but Rachel continued adjusting her posture until it felt less forced. By late afternoon, Mia realized she had barely eaten, barely rested, barely taken a moment to think. The transformation was not physical, it was psychological. She was being reshaped to step into a world she had only ever seen from the outside. As Rachel led her back to the conference room, where Ethan waited, Mia's heart pounded. He looked up as she entered. His expression flickered almost imperceptibly before returning to its calm composure. "It suits you," he said, not referring to her clothes, but to the quiet strength she was beginning to wear, as if it belonged to her all along. Mia exhaled slowly, unsure how to respond. She was not sure she believed his words, but hearing them made something settle inside her. And as she stood there in that vast room of glass and steel, she understood something clearly. This agreement might have started as survival, but the path forward was about to become something far more complicated than either of them expected. The following days unfolded with a pace that felt unreal to Mia, as if she had stepped onto a moving walkway and could not get off even if she wanted to. Rachel met her every morning with a schedule printed neatly on glossy paper. Fittings, etiquette briefings, media training sessions, and quiet lessons on how to carry herself beside Ethan during public appearances. Each task demanded a different kind of composure, and although Mia often felt overwhelmed, she refused to falter. She reminded herself constantly that this was for her mother, for their home, for survival. On the third afternoon, Rachel guided Mia back to the top floor where Ethan's conference room overlooked the skyline. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold, reflecting warmly against the glass walls. Ethan was reviewing documents with two of his advisors, but the moment Mia entered, his eyes lifted, sharp and attentive. The advisors finished and left quietly. When the doors closed, Ethan wheeled closer to her. "How is the preparation going?" he asked. His tone was neutral, but there was something softened in his eyes. Mia hesitated before answering. "It is a lot, but I am doing my best." "I know," he said simply. "Rachel says you are learning quickly." She felt a flicker of pride, followed by a familiar wave of doubt. "I just hope I do not embarrass you." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Mia, if anyone in this arrangement should worry about embarrassment, it is not you." She did not know how to respond to that. Before she could try, Rachel re-entered the room carrying a sleek black dress and a pair of modest heels. "We need to test how she handles a mock event," she explained. "The company hosts a charity reception tonight. Small, but public enough to serve as her first exposure." Mia's heart lurched. "Tonight?" Rachel nodded. "Better to start with a controlled environment. Cameras will be allowed, but limited." Ethan studied Mia closely, as if measuring whether she would break under pressure. She straightened instinctively. "I can do it," she said, though she could feel her pulse hammering in her throat. Rachel handed her the dress and directed her to a private changing room. When Mia stepped out minutes later, the room fell into a brief stillness. The dress was simple but elegant, shaping her silhouette without exaggeration, the dark color contrasting softly with her skin. Her hair, pinned loosely, framed her face with a gentleness she barely recognized. Ethan's expression shifted into something quiet, almost unreadable, before he looked away. "It will do," he said, his voice calm but lower than before. Rachel hid a knowing smile. The evening passed in a blur of nerves and whispered instructions. The venue was a boutique gallery downtown, filled with abstract paintings and donors dressed in tailored suits and polished dresses. Lights hung from the ceiling like floating stars, casting soft reflections across the glossy floor. Mia's breath caught as soon as she stepped inside. She felt dozens of eyes glance toward her and Ethan. Whispers followed, subtle but unmistakable. "Is that Ward's new fiancée?" someone murmured. "She looks too ordinary." Another voice added, "At least she is not trying too hard." Maybe that is the point. Mia forced herself not to shrink under the scrutiny. Ethan wheeled beside her, posture straight, expression unreadable. He leaned slightly toward her. "Ignore them," he murmured. "They will make up stories no matter what you do." She nodded, grateful for the encouragement. The first test came sooner than expected. A board member approached, a tall man with a stiff smile and an air of entitlement that seemed to follow him like cologne. He glanced at Ethan's wheelchair, then at Mia, then back again. "You always surprise us, Ethan," he said. "I did not expect you to attend, given your condition." Mia felt her chest tighten with anger at the thinly veiled insult, but Ethan remained calm, his face smooth as polished stone. The man continued, smiling as if he had said something clever. "And this must be your fiancée. You chose someone understated." Mia inhaled sharply, but instead of freezing, she stepped slightly closer to Ethan. Her voice came out steady, surprising even herself. "Understated does not mean unworthy," she replied. "But thank you for pointing out the difference." The man blinked, taken aback, then gave a tight smile before walking away. Ethan looked up at her slowly, the corners of his mouth lifting just enough to suggest something close to admiration. "Well done," he said. "You handled that better than many people I know." A warmth spread through Mia's chest, unexpected but deeply grounding. As the evening continued, she found herself adjusting, walking beside Ethan with increasing ease, responding to greetings, offering small smiles, listening more than speaking. She was still nervous, still overwhelmed, but something inside her had shifted. By the time they left the gallery, the night air felt lighter than before. Ethan paused beside the car, watching her for a long moment. "You did well tonight," he said softly. "Better than I anticipated." Mia met his gaze, and for the first time since agreeing to the contract, She felt the faintest pulse of confidence. Maybe she really could do this. Maybe she was more than a desperate girl grasping at survival. Maybe she was becoming someone stronger. Someone who could hold her own in a world that had never meant to welcome her. The ride back to the Ward estate was quiet, but it was not the suffocating silence Mia had feared. Instead, it felt like the calm that follows a storm, the kind that lets you breathe again even though you are still soaked from the rain. As the car rolled through the gates and up the long driveway, Mia gazed out the window at the sprawling grounds, lit softly by path lights that lined the stone walkways. The mansion stood tall against the night sky, elegant and imposing at the same time, a place built for someone important, someone powerful, someone who had once believed he would walk these halls with ease. She wondered what it must feel like to return to this place every night and know that everything inside was designed for strength you once had, not the body you lived in now. When they entered the house, Ethan instructed the driver to retire for the evening and motioned for Rachel to leave the remaining reports for morning. The staff disappeared into distant corridors, leaving the vast entryway strangely quiet. Mia stood awkwardly, unsure whether she should excuse herself or wait for Ethan to dismiss her. But he surprised her by saying, "Do you want to see the rest of the house?" The offer caught her off guard. "If it is not too much trouble," she replied carefully. Ethan gave a small nod. "It is your home now, even if temporarily. You should know it." He led her through wide hallways lined with framed photographs of city skylines, architectural sketches, and moments from Ward Corporation's early days. There were no family pictures, no childhood memories, nothing that suggested warmth. Only achievement. Only ambition. Mia followed him through the lounge, the study, and the library, each room coldly beautiful, every detail immaculate, but lacking a heartbeat. When they reached a set of double doors, Ethan hesitated before opening them. "This is the room I use for physical therapy," he said quietly. Mia felt her breath hitch. The space was larger than she expected, lined with parallel bars, mats, weights, and specialized equipment she had only seen in rehabilitation centers. There was no staff present, no therapist, just the faint smell of disinfectant and the distant hum of the air conditioning. Ethan wheeled himself toward the parallel bars, placing his hands on the cool metal before glancing back at her. "You do not have to watch," he said. "Most people prefer not to." Mia stepped closer. "If you are comfortable, I do not mind being here." A small, almost imperceptible tension left his shoulders. Without another word, he positioned himself and began the grueling process of transferring his weight from the wheelchair to the bars. The effort was tremendous. His arms flexed with strain, his jaw tightened, and his breaths grew deep and controlled. Mia felt her heart twist at the sight, not from pity, but from the unmistakable strength it took for him to keep going. He pushed himself up, legs trembling violently as he locked his elbows. For a moment, he managed to stand, not fully, not steadily, but with a determination that made Mia's chest ache. Then gravity won, and he sank back onto the seat, chest rising and falling with exhaustion. Sweat clung to his forehead. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. She reached instinctively for a clean towel hanging nearby and handed it to him. Even then, she made sure to move slowly, gently, allowing him to accept the gesture on his own terms. Ethan took the towel, his eyes searching hers for something, judgment, discomfort, perhaps embarrassment. But he found none. "I saw the way you looked at that board member tonight," she said softly. "Like you refused to let him see anything but strength." "But strength is not the same as perfection, Ethan." He let out a slow breath. "Everyone in my world expects me to pretend it does not hurt," he admitted. "To act as if this chair is an accessory rather than a reality." Mia shook her head. "Strength is not pretending. It is surviving the day even when the world expects you to fall." There was a long pause, one that felt like the air had shifted around them. Ethan glanced away, staring at the bars with a distant expression. "You should rest," he said after a moment, though his voice had lost some of its usual sharpness. "Tomorrow will be harder." Mia nodded and turned toward the door, her heart unexpectedly heavy. But before she stepped out, she looked back at him. He sat in the quiet room, the towel still in his hand, the weight of the world sitting beside him in a chair he never asked for. She realized then that this arrangement was not just about a contract or survival. There was a loneliness in him deeper than any clause could describe, a silent ache buried beneath a lifetime of expectations. And for the first time since she signed the contract, Mia understood that this story was not only about saving her mother or saving herself. It was becoming the story of a man who had forgotten how to be seen, and the woman who might finally see him. The days that followed settled into a rhythm Mia did not anticipate, as if the mansion itself had decided to breathe with her, guiding her through each unfamiliar moment. She woke early each morning to Rachel's gentle knock and followed a schedule that felt both relentless and strangely grounding. Lessons on public presence, silent coordination beside Ethan's wheelchair, and careful observation of the way people in his world used etiquette like armor all became part of her new routine. Each night, she found herself replaying moments she did not fully understand, particularly the quiet conversations she had begun sharing with Ethan. There was a subtle shift between them now, something unspoken but undeniable. She saw the guarded patience in his eyes when she walked beside him, and he noticed the way she breathed deeper when she felt safe. But neither of them dared to name it. The contract forbade such things, and even without that clause, the line between them was too delicate to cross. On the morning of the charity gala, the fifth required event in their agreement, Rachel approached Mia with an unusual stiffness in her tone. "There will be board members, donors, and extended family present tonight," she explained while fastening the clasp of Mia's necklace. "Some of them will attempt to provoke you. They are testing both of you, not just Ethan." "Testing us for what?" Mia asked, though part of her already knew. Rachel lowered her voice. "For weakness. For disruption. For any sign that Ethan is not in control of his life or his company." The thought made Mia's stomach twist. She had seen the way some people looked at him with false sympathy or thinly veiled contempt, as if his wheelchair defined his worth. And she had also seen how those looks hardened Ethan's expression, tightening the lines of his jaw, sharpening his silence into a blade. That evening, the hall chosen for the gala shimmered with golden lights reflecting off crystal chandeliers. Music drifted through the air, soft and elegant, while reporters waited discreetly near the entrance, cameras ready. Mia adjusted her dress nervously, her fingers brushing the smooth fabric. Ethan glanced up at her from his wheelchair and said quietly, "You look prepared." She smiled faintly. "I hope so." Together, they entered the hall. Heads turned immediately. Whispered voices followed them like a breeze through tall grass. For the first 20 minutes, the event proceeded smoothly. Mia followed the polished rhythm of walking beside him, speaking when spoken to, and offering quiet confidence when he paused to greet donors. But the calm shattered the moment a tall man stepped forward from the crowd, wearing a flawless suit and a smile far too sharp to be sincere. Mia recognized him from photographs Rachel had shown her. Lucas Ward, Ethan's ambitious cousin, a man who had been circling the company's leadership like a vulture waiting for weakness. "Ethan," Lucas drawled as he approached, holding a champagne glass he did not bother to hide his smirk behind. "I must say, you have been keeping us all entertained lately." Ethan's posture stiffened. "If you have something to say, Lucas, say it." Lucas's gaze slid to Mia with predatory delight. "Oh, I will. I must admit, when I heard you were engaged, I was skeptical. But now that I see her in person, everything makes sense." Ethan's voice lowered dangerously. "Lucas, do not worry." Lucas continued as if he had not heard him. "I understand perfectly. When you lack mobility, you must compensate somehow. And a contract is certainly a way to guarantee affection." Mia froze. Her breath caught. She felt her cheeks burn, not with embarrassment, but with anger. Lucas lifted his glass toward Ethan. "Tell me, cousin, did she negotiate a good price? Or did you simply promise to erase her debts like the generous savior you pretend to be?" A hush rippled through the crowd as a few nearby donors pretended not to stare. Ethan's fingers curled tightly around the armrest of his wheelchair. Mia felt something inside her ignite. She stepped forward slightly, placing herself between Lucas and Ethan. Her voice came out steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "You speak like someone who believes value comes from status," she said. "But from what I have seen, the only people obsessed with money are the ones who never earned anything without stepping on someone else." Lucas's smirk faltered. "Careful," he warned. "I am family." "Then act like it," Mia said quietly. "Because right now, you are only proving why Ethan had to build everything alone." A few nearby guests gasped. Lucas's face hardened, the charming mask cracked. He leaned in close enough for only Ethan and Mia to hear. You think you can hide the truth? Someone will expose your little arrangement sooner or later. Ethan's eyes flashed with warning. Enough, he said. His voice held a weight that silenced everyone around them. Lucas stepped back with a venomous smile. We will see how long the facade lasts. He drifted back into the crowd, leaving a trail of tension behind him. Mia exhaled shakily. Ethan turned his head slightly toward her. You handled that with more grace than most people in this room. She shook her head. I said too much. No, he corrected softly. You said what someone needed to say. Their eyes met for a brief, lingering moment. And in that moment, something between them shifted again, deeper than before. But neither of them noticed Lucas watching from across the room, eyes narrowed, already planning the next move that would send everything spiraling. Tonight was only the beginning of the storm he intended to unleash. The fallout from the gala did not happen immediately. It unfolded slowly, like a fuse burning toward an explosion no one could stop. In the days that followed, Ethan grew quieter, more focused, meeting with lawyers and board members in closed-door sessions that stretched late into the night. Mia could feel the tension building around him, a kind of pressure that settled over the mansion like a storm cloud that refused to break. He spoke less during their shared moments, but when he did, his voice carried the weight of someone who knew trouble was closing in. Mia continued her training with Rachel, but even Rachel seemed more guarded than usual, glancing at her phone too often, whispering with staff in the hallways, giving Mia the uneasy feeling that something was happening behind the scenes. On the fourth evening after the gala, as Mia prepared to leave the dining room, Ethan called her name gently. Stay a moment, he said. She paused, turning back toward him. He looked exhausted, shadows beneath his eyes and tension etched across his jaw. But he still held himself with the same poised control she had come to recognize. Lucas has been meeting with several board members, Ethan said. He has been pushing a narrative about our engagement. Mia's heart tightened. What kind of narrative? That it is not a real relationship, Ethan replied. That you are here to manipulate the company. That I am too unstable to lead. She swallowed hard. And they believe him. Ethan looked away briefly. Some do. Others want to. They see my condition as an opportunity. The way he said it, calmly, with no bitterness, made Mia's chest ache. She moved closer instinctively. Then what do? We prepare, Ethan said. The wedding is in 2 days. Lucas will try to use it against us. We must be ready for whatever he plans. Mia nodded, though she felt a tremor of fear run through her. She had known the arrangement came with risks, but she had not realized the battlefield would be this brutal. That night, she found herself unable to sleep. She walked through the quiet halls of the mansion, passing framed documents from Ethan's early career, photos of the company's first major deal, awards lining a marble shelf. Everything he had built, he had done while the world doubted him. Everything he had achieved, he had fought for alone. She wondered how long a person could endure being doubted before it became part of their bones. As she approached the therapy room, she heard the faint sound of metal clinking. She peered inside. Ethan was alone, gripping the parallel bars, his arms trembling with the effort of lifting himself. Sweat rolled down his forehead. His breath came in heavy bursts. Mia stepped into the room. Ethan, she said softly, it is late. You should rest. He kept his focus on the bars. Rest does not change tomorrow, he said. Lucas wants to prove I am incapable. If I let myself weaken now, he wins. Mia moved beside him, her voice gentle but firm. You are already stronger than he will ever admit. Hurting yourself will not change that. His grip tightened, his muscles shaking, but after a final strained attempt, he slowly lowered himself back into the wheelchair. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, frustration shadowing his face. Mia leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. You do not have to fight alone. Ethan looked at her, and something in his eyes shifted, something raw and vulnerable. I have been fighting alone for a long time, he said. It is difficult to believe that has changed. Mia reached out, placing her hand lightly on his. It was a simple gesture, but one that held more truth than either of them dared to speak aloud. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with preparations for the ceremony. Florists moved through the halls, decorators arranged elegant white roses along the staircases, and staff ensured every detail was perfect. Yet beneath the beauty, Mia felt a growing unease. It was in the way some staff exchanged glances, the way security members spoke in hushed tones, the way Rachel kept checking her messages with a tightened jaw. As evening approached and Mia stepped into her wedding gown, a simple, graceful dress chosen not for extravagance but for sincerity, she felt the world shift again. Rachel entered, her expression tense. "Mia," she said carefully, "there is something you should know." Mia's heart stopped. "What is it?" Rachel took a breath. "Lucas has obtained a copy of your contract, the one outlining the terms of your marriage." Mia felt the room tilt slightly. "How?" "We do not know," Rachel answered. "But he intends to reveal it publicly, and he plans to do it during the wedding ceremony." A cold wave rushed through Mia's body. The contract, her desperation written in black ink, had the power to humiliate both of them, to destroy Ethan's position, to turn her into a spectacle. "Can we stop him?" she whispered. "Not without creating a larger scandal," Rachel said. "If you try to silence him, it confirms everything he wants people to believe." Mia pressed a trembling hand to her chest as the truth settled in her stomach like a stone. Lucas was going to expose everything. Ethan's trust, her sacrifice, their fragile alliance. It would all be torn apart in front of an audience of hundreds. Mia felt lightheaded, the weight of the moment crashing over her. "Rachel," she whispered, "what should I do?" Rachel squeezed her hand tightly. "Stand beside Ethan," she said. "No matter what happens. That is the only path through this." But deep down, Mia already feared the truth. Lucas's plan was not just to expose the contract. It was to break Ethan and destroy her in the process. The morning of the wedding dawned with a stillness that felt unnatural, as if the world itself sensed the storm waiting to break. Mia stood before the mirror in a quiet preparation room, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the simple veil resting over her shoulders. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Part of her looked like a bride, but beneath the softness of the gown and the careful arrangement of her hair, she felt the tight ache of fear twisting inside her. She knew what Lucas intended to do. She knew the humiliation he planned to unleash. And yet, she also knew there was no turning back, not without abandoning Ethan to a battle no one should face alone. When Rachel entered the room, her face pale but composed, Mia already knew the ceremony had begun gathering guests. "It is time," Rachel said softly. Mia exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. "Rachel, if Lucas shows the contract, if everything falls apart, you stand beside Ethan," Rachel repeated firmly. "That is the only thing that matters today." Mia nodded, gathering her courage like a fragile thread wrapped around her heart. She stepped into the hallway, where two security guards waited to escort her toward the garden terrace where the ceremony would take place. The path was lined with white roses and lanterns, the air filled with the faint scent of lavender drifting on a gentle breeze. Beyond the floral arch, guests filled the space, murmuring softly as they spotted her. Some faces she recognized from earlier events. Others were board members, donors, and even reporters holding cameras discreetly lowered at their sides. At the front, Ethan waited. He sat in his chair dressed in a tailored suit that matched the colors of the decor, his eyes focused solely on her as she approached. For a moment, everything fell away. Lucas, the contract, the fear, and all she saw was the quiet strength in his gaze. She stepped beside him, and he reached for her hand, his touch steady and grounding. The officiant began speaking, his voice warm and practiced, but only a few sentences passed before the moment shattered. A sharp voice cut through the ceremony. "Before you continue, there is something everyone here deserves to know." Lucas stepped forward from the crowd, holding a folder in his hand, the faint glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Gasps rippled through the audience. Mia felt her stomach drop. He raised the papers high enough for the front rows to see. "This," he announced, "is a contract. A marriage contract between Ethan Ward and this woman. A contract that proves this wedding is nothing more than a business arrangement." Stunned murmurs spread quickly. Some guests leaned forward, whispering to each other. Others frowned in disapproval. Mia felt the familiar sting of humiliation rising in her chest, but she clung to Ethan's hand, forcing herself not to crumble. Lucas smirked. Paragraph 3, Clause 2. The parties agree that this marriage is not based on romantic interest. Paragraph 5. The bride shall attend a minimum of 5 public events to sustain the appearance of partnership. And paragraph 7. That is enough, Ethan said, his voice suddenly louder than Lucas's. The crowd fell silent. Ethan moved his chair slightly forward, positioning himself between Lucas and Mia. His eyes were sharp, steady, and filled with a resolve Mia had never seen so clearly. Yes, Ethan said, a contract exists. And yes, it outlines obligations between us. But what Lucas is not telling you is that I never signed it. A ripple of shock moved through the guests. Lucas's confident posture faltered. You are lying, he snapped. Ethan held out his hand, and Rachel stepped forward with a second folder, the real one. Ethan opened it, showing the final page. His signature line remained blank, completely untouched. I wanted to see who Mia was when the world believed this agreement was one-sided. Ethan continued. I wanted to know whether she would choose kindness even when she had everything to lose. And she did. She protected me when others mocked me. She stood with me when she had no reason to. And she never once asked for anything in return. He paused, letting the truth settle into the silence. She did not manipulate me. She saved me. Lucas tried to speak, but Ethan lifted his hand sharply. You, Ethan said, have spent your life trying to build power by tearing down others. You have tried to use my condition, my reputation, and now Mia, to secure a leadership role you never earned. Ethan turned toward the officiant, then back to the crowd, his voice steady and strong. But I will not live my life dictated by fear or manipulation. Not anymore. With that, he took the contract in his hands and ripped it cleanly down the center. The sound echoed through the garden like a declaration, like a rebirth. Lucas's face twisted with rage. You will regret this. The board will never support you after this display. Ethan met his glare without flinching. Then they can remove me, he said calmly. But at least they will not own me. Mia felt tears sting her eyes. Ethan turned to her then, his expression softening in a way she had never seen before. Mia, he said quietly, if you want this marriage to end today, I will not hold you to anything. You are free. She shook her head immediately, her voice trembling. No, I am here because I chose to be, not because of a contract. Ethan's breath caught, a flicker of emotion breaking through the composed lines of his face. He reached for her hand again. Then let us begin without lies or obligations. The officiant, shaken but composed, continued the ceremony. This time, Mia and Ethan exchanged vows not out of survival, but out of sincerity. Cameras clicked softly, but no longer with scandal in mind. Something genuine had taken its place. When the ceremony ended, Mia leaned closer to Ethan and whispered, "Thank you for standing up for us." He shook his head gently. "You taught me how." In the weeks that followed, Ethan stepped back from the board, choosing instead to focus on rebuilding his life with purpose, not pressure. Mia stayed by his side, not as a contractual partner, but as someone who understood his battles and walked through them willingly. Together, they established a rehabilitation and community center for individuals recovering from traumatic injuries, giving others the strength Ethan had fought so hard to reclaim. And in a quiet corner of their home, framed on the wall behind glass, was the torn contract. The symbol of the day they chose love over power and integrity over status. It was the day everything broke, and the day everything finally began.